Before I get started, I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, all good.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me in class today. I've been really excited to meet you all. Rachel's told me a lot of amazing things about her students. But I live, like she said, in the Florida Keys, which is the southernmost part of the United States. I actually am the education director at this really cool marine science center. And we have students come from all over the country and visit our facility. And we get to take them into the ocean, going snorkeling, going fishing, going swimming, finding different critters. But we teach marine science, so we teach anything and everything about the ocean, whether that's about sharks, whether that's about snails, crabs, you name it. But that's where I am, and that's what I primarily do down here in Florida Keys.
So Casey, you just said a word that sparked my interest. So you teach about sharks. Does that mean that you interact with sharks?
Yes, we do interact with sharks. So sometimes when we do our fishing program, we'll catch sharks and always release them, but we also do some shark research where we'll tag them ourselves. And then when we release them, the next fisherman to catch that shark can take the tag information, put it online, and see how far that shark has traveled in the ocean.
That is unbelievable. So you're saying that you can manage and you take information from the sharks and the fish that you tag. And when you tag the animal, does it injure the animal?
So it doesn't, it pierces the animal so the tag can stay in there. We're not necessarily taking any samples from it. It's part of what's called a citizen science project. So anyone has the capability to do so, as long as you do it in a safe and gentle manner, because we always want to make sure we put our organisms back in the ocean the same way that we found them. So we interact with sharks in that degree, but when we get in the water and we swim, we see sharks. We actually have a resident shark at our facility that lives in a giant cement blocked in pool. It's like half the size of an Olympic swimming pool, and we feed those sharks and take care of those sharks as well.
Oh my goodness. And in case, if you can just explain a little bit about what catch and release mean.
So when you go out fishing with a hook and a line, if you bring something in, there are a lot of different fish in the ocean that you can keep and eat, which a lot of people do, but there are a lot of species that are protected that we don't want to harm. So if you do accidentally catch it, what you do is you take it off the hook and then you just put it right back in the water.
Awesome. I appreciate that. That's awesome. That makes me happy for the fish and the animals that you're taking.
And I actually also went snorkeling for critters. So I put on a mask and a snorkel and went and swam around to see what I could find. So I have a handful of critters here that I want to talk to you all about. And I think what Rach and I decided was I'll talk to you about a couple of critters, and then if you have a question about them, we'll do the same thing. We'll open up the floor for questions about the critters. So I figured we'd start small and work our way up to the bigger, exciting critters. So let me just grab them right next to me.
All right, I can't contain myself. I'm so excited. Make sure you guys are all focused on screen, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is really cool for Casey to be doing this. So make sure you guys are paying attention. And please don't forget to pay attention to the fact that she's wearing a Red Sox hat. Yeah, Kate. All right, the floor is yours, girl.
Okay, the first thing I'm going to show you all today is what's called a turbo snail. Now, turbo snails are really cool because they live on top of rocks, and they create their own shell. So snails in the ocean, they just grow their shell as they get bigger. So they keep the same shell throughout their entire life. Now, turbo snails, you can see they have this fun little whorl on top. So they go up like that, and they live on the top of rocks, and then they just eat algae. So that's its body right there. You can see it moving in and out. And they actually made a movie called Turbo based on this snail. I don't know if any of you have seen it before.
Oh, guys, raise your hand if you've seen that movie before, Turbo, about the snail. I know some of you guys have talked about that before.
And it's about the racing snails. So that is a turbo snail right there. Now, when I was out collecting snails, I actually came across another shell, which I thought was a snail, but it was actually a hermit crab. So in this shell right here, we have a teeny tiny hermit crab living inside. He's going to come out and say hello for you. Now, hermit crabs, they'll eat other hermit crabs as well, but they steal shells. So my favorite thing about hermit crabs is they don't grow their shells like our snails do, but they just walk around the bottom of the seafloor waiting to find a new shell. Now, hermit crabs don't have the best eyesight, but they have the best sense of scent. So they can actually smell when another hermit crab maybe have passed away or another hermit crab has ditched its shell, and they all congregate around to try and get the best shell. So hermit crabs are always on the hunt to find a new home because as they get bigger, they need to find bigger shells. He's a little shy for us today. All right, now, does anyone have any questions about hermit crabs or snails, Rach? They're covered in brown spines all over.
They used to.
And what they do is they actually cover up their bodies with sand and rocks and seaweed so they can blend in to the ocean floor. So these are cousins to the sand dollars.
Oh. So they used to have been alive?
Yes.
Oh.
We found this on the shoreline.
Cool.
I know in Key West they have those roosters.
There are a lot of roosters in Key West. I like the roosters, but sometimes they can be very loud and scare you.
Oh, yeah. I have family members down in Key West. They always say, like, these roosters are waking me up.
Like a nice natural alarm clock.
It is.
Oh, yeah. They say that all the time.
And Callie, where I live, I'm only an hour from Key West, so I'm very close.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Like
Great question. Thank
you.
you.
Are you like down the street from Key West or like an hour?
I'm about an hour, yes. So
Oh,
it takes me an
cool.
hour in my car.
That's really cool.
And Casey, to get to the Keys, what do you have to do? Get to Key West.
You mean the drive?
Yes.
Oh, to get to Key West, you have to pass where I live on my island over the giant 7-mile bridge when you're driving down. Mm-hmm.
7-mile bridge. I've done it before.
Wow.
A great place to see the sunrise, though, I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Callie. Great question for Casey.
It's called a serpent sea star. Now, I'm trying not to let it drip over my computer. So this is a type of starfish, this sea star right here. And it's got 5 limbs. It kind of looks creepy crawly. But they're really cool because just like lizards, if they drop their tail, they can grow it back. These sea stars can actually grow their limbs back. Now, I found this sea star living under a rock this morning, and they are nocturnal, so they don't like to be out during the day when the sun is out. They like to be in dark and cold places. So this is its head right here, and then its mouth is actually right there in the middle of its body. And the reason why I'm holding it right here in its central disc is because it will drop a limb. And it's really cool that they have that. They have the capability to do that. But it takes a long time for them to grow it back. Now, one of the reasons why they will drop a limb is if something else is coming to eat it, like a snail or another crab or a fish. What they'll do is to try and save themselves, they'll drop that limb and hope that it'll go and eat its limb and it can go under a rock and try and stay away.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Now, this one looks very similar, but this one's called a brittle sea star. So they have the same body plan and they have all of these limbs. They have those 5 limbs, so they kind of crawl around. I'll let you guys see it move. But so they move by what's called tube feet. And tube feet is kind of like a channel in their body that they move water through. So they use the water around them in the ocean to pump it through these channels, and it gives them the energy to move along. So they don't have muscles like we do where we are holding something and we're nice and strong. Eventually we're going to get tired and we have to put that down. The sea stars, they can just continuously pump water into their bodies and they will never get tired.
Wow. Wow. Let's hold
a tulip snail. So this is the tulip snail. You can see it's a little bigger. And its body is inside of its shell. But so it hasn't come out for us yet, but there is a hard part right here on this tulip snail, and that is called an operculum. So what's really unique about this tulip snail is if it gets caught in a low tide and it can't get back to the ocean, it can close itself up in the shell, and it acts like a trap door, and it keeps water inside so they can wait for the tide to come back when it can go back in the water. But also if a predator is coming along, another bigger snail or a fish, they can put their entire bodies back in their shells and they can hide away safe and sound. So this snail has been kind of shy for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep an eye out on it in the tank, and hopefully it starts walking around, and if it does, I can show you its body. But that is a tulip snail. And then the next one I think you all are really going to like, because everybody always thinks you're not allowed to hold these because they can hurt you. But as long as you're very gentle and careful with them, they will not harm you. So this is a sea urchin right here. Now, this sea urchin has all of these spikes all over its body, and they live under rocks and live on rocks. So that's its body right there. And then I'll show you its mouth too. That is the mouth of a sea urchin. Now, sea urchins are what we call grazers. They're kind of like cows. So like cows like to graze in the pasture and eat the grass. Our sea urchins do the same thing, but on top of rocks. So what they'll do is they'll live on top of rocks and under rocks, and they eat that algae we keep talking about. So almost like that sea lettuce in the sea, good, healthy meal. Now, there's always a lot of algae in the ocean because it grows. It's a plant. So since the sun hits the ocean, that algae and that plant can continue to grow, since that's all it needs in order to create its food and its energy. So algae is a big diet for a lot of different organisms in the ocean. Now, what's really cool is you guys can see, hopefully you can see all those spines moving about.
Yeah.
And that is our sea urchin. So if you were to be out in the water and you stepped on one of these, that's when it would hurt you. These spines can actually break off. So you can get them out with a pair of tweezers, but if you pick them up, as long as you're gentle with them, the sea urchins can be gentle with you. So these are really cool species. And just like our sea stars, where if they lose a limb, they can grow them back. If these urchins lose any spines, they can grow back too.
Very cool. Casey, I noticed that with some of these critters, when you take them to show us that they're dripping with water, are you keeping some of them in water, and can some live out of water?
So all these critters have to live in water. So what I have set up over here is a couple of buckets that they're living in. So they have to have water, and they also have to have oxygen. So this is a bubbler that's making bubbles and oxygen for our critters. Just like if you have any fish tanks at home or you go to the aquarium, you'll see they have those as well.
Awesome, awesome. I can tell that you you are very knowledgeable about these critters, but you're very passionate and you care about them too. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that big time. All right.
Is get a reusable water bottle. So I've had this water bottle for 5 years, which means I haven't bought a plastic single-use water bottle in a very long time. As long as you can drink the water safely, you can carry this around with you everywhere.
That's inspirational. Thank you, Casey. I'm going to, we're running out of time, so I'm going to let you carry on with your critters.
All right, cool. So I've got 3 main critters left, and then we'll bring in Buddy at the end. So yeah. I'll just give a fun fact about each of these. So the next critter we're going to talk about today is called a sea cucumber. So this is a sea cucumber right here.
Oh my goodness.
Now, sea cucumbers are just like our snails and our crabs that we've talked about. They walk along the bottom of the ocean floor and they eat algae off of rocks. They've got all of these tiny little rows of those tubes we talked about, and they just walk along the bottom. When I found this sea cucumber, he actually was pooping out sand. So they eat all of this algae and they eat all of this stuff off the bottom of the ocean floor, and then they poop it out and they help make the sand in the ocean. So this is a sea cucumber. Now they can get as this is a pretty big sea cucumber, but they get at your thumb as well. So if everyone looks at your thumb, there are also sea cucumbers that are that small as well. The next critter I have is what's called a clinger crab. So you guys have probably all seen crabs of some sort in New England, in Boston. You can see it's hanging onto my towel. Now they're called channel clinger crabs because they like to attach themselves. Oh, there we go. They like to attach themselves onto rocks. So they so you can see he will not let go of my towel. So this one's really cool. They're actually also eat algae off of the rocks. And this is a common theme. Everything just loves to eat the algae. We'll see if it lets go. I'm gonna leave it right here. Oh.
He's a stage 5 clinger.
He's a stage 5 clinger. Oh,
Nice.
perfect. So that's our channel clinger crab. And then last but not least is a very famous critter in the Florida Keys, and it's called a queen conch. So this is one of the largest snails we can find in the ocean. And the reason why it's so popular is because of how beautiful its shell is. So queen conchs, there is a snail inside. He's hiding just like our other snail, but you guys see how beautiful this shell is? So they're actually protected, which means people used to eat queen conch, but now in the United States, it's illegal to do so because people used to catch them so much that there weren't any left in the ocean. But now they're protected, so they can live a happy life in the ocean. But they have these amazing, beautiful shells, and they are eaten by what's called a horse conch. And this is the shell of a horse conch. This is probably a 30-year-old, or once was a 30-year-old snail. Now, again, snails, they make their own shells. But there's nothing living inside of here anymore, as you can see. But horse conchs love to eat the queen conchs, and they chase them down, and they spit out their entire stomachs and put it into the queen conch shell and slurp it out, just like you're drinking down a slushie. They just break it down and then suck the whole thing right out.
I'm blown away right now. That is the biggest snail shell I've ever seen in my life. That's amazing. So you see shells that size often in the Keys.
Yes, with living organisms.
And that's wonderful that they're now protected all through the United States. That's amazing. Kate, is that it for the live creatures?
Yes, that is all of our live critters.
Before we move on to our special friend, would you like to show us? I know you have something from a shark.
Oh yes, I do. So we were talking about sharks earlier, and we have a ton of different shark species down here in the Keys. But this is the jaws of a lemon shark. Now this lemon shark was 10 feet long from this set of jaws. Now, my favorite thing about sharks are their teeth. You can see how sharp and pointy they are, but they also have what's called rows of replaceable teeth. So if a shark goes to eat a fish and loses a row of teeth, there is a backup set of teeth that just comes right in like a conveyor belt, and they fill right in. So those teeth are always being made, and they're always coming forward because they're constantly eating. So they're very super sharp. Obviously, sharks are really unique because no shark species jaw is the same. The teeth are different depending on what fish they eat, where they live. So their diets are different depending on what they are eating. So this is a very cool lemon shark jaw.
That is amazing. Casey, I know in the past you've told me you work a lot with nurse sharks. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And nurse sharks, are they, so I've heard a rumor, are nurse sharks, are they safe? Are they safe to be around?
So of all the shark species in the ocean, nurse sharks, their nickname are the dogs of the sea. because they need to train. They're also probably the safest shark species to be around. And that's just the case because their set of jaws actually faces down to the bottom of the ocean. And they're not known, their teeth aren't as sharp as other species. They like to eat the crabs we've talked about, they'll eat the snails we've talked about, they eat everything on the bottom of the ocean floor, not necessarily fish. But you can go in a lot of places around the world and swim with nurse sharks safely, but that's not to say if one latches onto you that it's going to be a good time. But they are probably a safer species to interact with, yes.
Cool, cool, thank you. All right, so let's wrap up our class with a cool little story that I know about Casey. So Casey, as she mentioned earlier, grew up in Connecticut and moved to the Keys in, what about 8 years ago?
I'm on 6 years ago now.
6 years ago, wow. It's amazing. I'm so glad you're still.
I know.
And when you moved over there, there was an island cat called Buddy, correct?
Correct.
And so the mystery of Buddy is that we don't know exactly how she got to the island, but we understand that it could have been because of a storm, right?
So the storm was the duck. So we used to also have an island duck that potentially washed up from a storm. But Buddy either came here from an old employee or from when they used to let cats and dogs live out here. She was the last standing cat potentially, or somebody brought her out. So we don't know how old she is, and we don't know her origin story.
But she just roams on the island like she owns it.
And she's been here for about we don't know how old she is, but she's been here for about 14 years.
Wow. And so is Buddy available to say hi to us?
Yes, I'll go get Buddy.
So guys, we're learning about fish. We're learning about sharks. Oh my God, there's a shark behind me. We're learning about sea cucumbers. I've never seen a sea cucumber like that. The seashells that she showed us, guys, the snails, the size of that snail shell, I've never seen anything like that before. That is amazing. But this is pretty cool because this cat, this island cat, has traveled more than you think she has. So everyone meet Buddy. This is Buddy.
This is Buddy the cat, everyone. She just was napping. Like Rachel said, she's here longer than any staff member. And Buddy and I actually, we had to leave Florida 3 years ago because a hurricane was coming. So we decided to take Buddy with us, and I drove Buddy all the way back up to Connecticut and back. So Buddy is an adventurous cat. She hadn't left the islands except for going to the vet in about 10 years. So she has officially seen New England.
She's officially seen New England. And Casey, I love that story because I remember the hurricane and a lot of people were scared to stay in Florida. It was a very dangerous time for Florida. And so not only did you protect yourself, but you protected your friend Buddy and rescued her, drove her all the way to Connecticut and all the way back. And I think that's such an amazing story. It was such a pleasure to introduce you to my friends and for them to meet you. And my mind is blown. I have so many questions, but we ran out of time. Thank you so much for your time and finding all those words, teaching us so much about what you do.
And Rich, if your peeps have more questions that we weren't able to get to, feel free to write them down and send them to me, and I can answer them. And you can read it off in your next class or when you have time. But I will gladly answer any questions that they have and send along photos, and yeah.
Awesome. I love that so much. Thanks again. You're a true friend. I miss you big time.
I know, I miss you too.
Okay.
It was nice to meet you all.
All right, everyone give a wave. Class is over. I'll see you guys at Tuesday afternoon review. Thank you, Casey.
Thanks, Rach.